file this under the category of there was a bunch of publicly available information and one single person just kind of noticed something about it, and then everyone was like, hey, that's a really good observation, and now everybody's reporting on it, including this guy, John Cartwright over from Good Vibes Gaming. Please check them out. Lovely, lovely man. Love him so much. I've had him on Arlocast once or twice. I miss you, John. I miss you. We need to do something. He was apparently the first person wise enough, sharp enough to notice this. Nintendo just posted their financial results for the previous quarter. That is the first quarter of Nintendo's 2025 fiscal year, running from April to June. During that time, it seems, interestingly enough, that Tears of the Kingdom actually sold less than Breath of the Wild. It sold less, and it's not a huge difference. It's really not. Breath of the Wild sold about 200,000 copies. Tears of the Kingdom sold about 190,000 copies. And like, yeah, sure, it's not a huge difference. It's not a huge thing. It doesn't mean Tears of the Kingdom is a flop or anything. It's already sold like 20 million copies, and you know, Breath of the Wild sold like 31 by now. But I do think that it is interesting. This story was inevitably going to catch my attention because I love talking about sales and I love talking about Zelda. It's two of my favorite things. It's like peanut butter and jelly. And there are reasons to be surprised by this and reasons not to be surprised by this. Sequels very rarely sell as well as original games. Unless you're talking multiplayer. I think sometimes if it multiplayer, yeah, I went over this whole thing when I was talking about how Splatoon 3, I expected it to sell a lot less, but it ended up selling really well, and I didn't consider that some people who kind of missed the boat on a multiplayer game, they are then going to want to get in on the next one, so you have them combined with the people who were into the original blah blah blah. But like for single player games, generally, you have a game, not as many people are gonna buy the sequel, because you know, people who want to get into the series are probably going to get the first one first, and after that point, there will be inevitably a percentage of those people who did not enjoy the game enough to buy the sequel. So, in that sense, it shouldn't be surprising. You know, and the Switch is selling all the time. You know, the Switch sells a few million units every single quarter, and it stands to reason that a lot of those people who get into the Switch ecosystem for the very first time, they want to buy all of the games, you know, like the Switch games. Breath of the Wild, Mario Odyssey, maybe, you know, whatever the latest Pokemon game is, Smash, that kind of stuff. So like, I do get that, but it's still surprising to me for a few reasons. One, a lot of people, not everyone, obviously, there will be arguments in the comments of this video about it. I will discourage anyone from having that argument because it's so old. It's so old by now. Not every single... You don't have to take every single opportunity to argue that you like Breath of the Wild more. You just don't have to. You don't have to. Release yourself of the obligation to argue that you didn't like Tears of the Kingdom, or did, or whatever, at every single opportunity. Let's just talk sales. Let's talk sales today. But I would say that there is at least a pretty good amount of people who believe that Tears of the Kingdom is kind of the better game, because they took the game and they just expanded it. And, you know, whether or not it's a disappointing sequel, again, isn't necessarily the point. If you're gonna just play one of them, there are a lot of people who will say Tears of the Kingdom is just Breath of the Wild, but more, but better, but more options, more features, more of a reason to use all of the materials that the game gives you in Breath of the Wild. It gives you all this stuff and there's barely anything to do with it, and it's kind of weird, and it's the same map, but this time it just has more stuff to do, more stuff to accomplish. So in that sense, I'm a little bit surprised that Tears of the Kingdom sales are not stronger. The legs are not as strong or long or whatever. But also, it's just the fact that Tears of the Kingdom is only like a year old. It's like a little over a year old now. So I would think that there were still people who were getting in on it. You know, still a pretty good number of people who did play Breath of the Wild, you know, maybe even years ago, maybe even at launch, that just haven't picked up Tears of the Kingdom yet. I would think that there would be quite a few people who are just slowly trickling in and getting into it. And you know what, I will admit, maybe those aren't good points. Maybe it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter that that game came out more recently, or that it is kind of the same game again, but a little bit more. Maybe I am not giving enough credit to the idea that Breath of the Wild is just one of those, like, seminal Switch experiences. Everybody gets the Mario and the Zelda, and between the two, Breath of the Wild is the one that came first, and it's also the cheaper one. That one is $60, Tears of the Kingdom is $70. That could make the difference right there. Tears of the Kingdom is the only Nintendo Switch game that's $70, and that could deter some people. Along with the idea that, like, well, I don't want to buy the sequel. I don't want to get the sequel before playing the original. So I don't know. Maybe that's enough right there. And you also have to consider that, like, Switch games, you know, Mario and Zelda and Pokemon and all them, they've got pretty good legs. But overall, games do tend to kind of drop off a cliff after they come out. Those sales do not often have those kinds of legs. Tears of the Kingdom sold most of those 20 million copies very, very, very early in its life. Maybe it's lucky to have sold as much as it has. Maybe it's lucky to have sold 190,000 units within this last quarter, because it's not in that club of games, Mario Odyssey and all that. I don't really know. But it's fun to talk about. I don't know. Just kind of fun to discuss. Sales numbers just fascinate the heck out of me. So thank you, John Cartwright, for giving us this interesting little tidbit. When are you going to come to PAX? Come on, man. Come to PAX.